Krishna. Hare Krishna, dear devotees, and welcome to today's session. How are you doing? I pray that all is well with you and your families at this time. So one of the biggest questions about ourselves as we're assessing life is, who am I? It's quite a it's quite a scary question, because to ask that means you're questioning the person's identity. The identity that that person believes of who they are is a very deep part of how they will act. So you can see from discussing karma and karma yoga and buddhi yoga, it is giving us now a deeper level of inquiry, of questioning, who are we? From what level of existence do we create our identity? And that's a very deep question, because if we feel we're the body, we have a certain identity at that level. If we feel with the mind and intelligence, then we'll have a different level of identity. If we feel with the soul, if we're connecting from experiencing life at the level of the soul, then we have a completely different level of identity. And in today's verse, this is the lesson Krishna is bringing to Arjuna's attention. Arjun, who are you actually? Because the way you perceive yourself is the way you will act. So let's take a look at this. Bhagavad Gita, chapter 2, verse number 49. Durena hi aviram karma buddhi yoga dhananjaya buddhau sharanam anvicha kripana falahetava. Translation: O Dhananjaya, keep all abominable activities far distant by devotional service. This is a very beautiful interplay of the philosophy, because here Krishna is exposing the mind when it becomes disturbed. What is happening here? Krishna is saying, Arjuna, keep abominable things far distant. Arjuna has only heard half of the sentence. Durena hi aviram karma, that keep abominable things distant. So because his mind is still perturbed, when he heard this statement from Krishna, he interpreted this as Krishna saying, Arjun, no need to fight now, because fighting is abominable. Keep it far away. This is what the mind does. When the mind is perturbed and disturbed, then it hears what it wants to hear. It doesn't hear the truth. So unless you keep this bodily level of consciousness of fighting and defending and failure and defeat, unless you keep that far away, you're not going to understand what is devotional service. So let's see how Krishna explains this to him. He goes on, and in that consciousness, surrender unto the Lord. So he's saying, Arjun, your problem is consciousness. Your consciousness now is rooted at the bodily level. You're experiencing the whole world and all this trauma because of your bodily identification, because your identity that you are understanding yourself as is as the body. And we explain tediously, so many verses, almost 20 slokas, that you are not the body. But your identity is now based on the body. And unless you change your consciousness about that, you are not going to be able to keep these abominable things far away. And that abominable thing is the weakness of heart. Hridhay Dorlabhya, the weakness of the heart. To have courage and make a decision and follow the spiritual mentor or the spiritual guide. That weakness is what I'm saying to keep far away. You misinterpreting as if I'm saying don't fight. I'm not saying that, Arjun. You misinterpreting what I'm saying. So this is the nature of the mind. It takes half the sentence that favors its position and holds on to it and say, oh, just see, Guru Maharaj has said. I'm not saying that, Arjun. I'm saying this miserly weakness, move that far away. And why you experiencing this is because you're identifying yourself from the level of the body. So what is the right identification? Who are we? At what level of our human experience can we understand who we are? Well, we need to know which part of ourselves don't change. That is where we're going to find who we are. Which part of ourselves don't change. So let's see, go on. Those who want to enjoy the fruits of their work are misers. Ooh. This is a strong word. You know, when we were growing up, to call somebody a miser, ooh, that was a strong word. I'm remembering all the great English novels that we used to study of Shakespeare and others, which always spoke about the villain as a miser. Huh? So Krishna is using this word. Why? Because he's questioning his identity. It's a strong word, but it makes you question your identity. Who am I? At what level am I understanding the world? Because it's at that level that I'll act in this world. So my identity is relevant to my action. The way I see myself is the way I'll behave. So you see the connection with Buddhi Yoga and Karma Yoga. That unless you understand who you are, you're going to be thinking you are something. When we were growing up, we used to say, hey, you know who I am, you know me. You don't worry if you know me, I don't even know who I am. So to understand your identity is to know how to act. Therefore, it's so important that Krishna is bringing this point here. That Arjuna, your consciousness is at the level of the body. Therefore, you are perceiving yourself as this. Raise your consciousness to the level of the soul, and then you'll really understand what is abominable action and what is your true action on the level of your identity. So he goes on in the purport. One who has actually come to understand one's constitutional position as an eternal servitor of the Lord, give up all engagements save working in Krishna consciousness. So unless you understand who you are, how are you going to know how to act? You remember earlier on we did the story of the eagle and the chickens. Because the eagle thought he was a chicken, he never realized that he could fly and he had the power and he had the freedom of the skies. But he saw himself, his identity as a chicken, and therefore he behaved as such. So if we only see ourselves as the body and relate to the world in duality, which is a symptom of the body and its understanding, then we're going to have a bodily experience of life, which means we will suffer the dualities, the good and bad, the happiness and distress. But Krishna is saying, Arjun, this is a lower level of consciousness. You are a deeper person than that. As a human being, your connection, your identity is from the level of the soul. So connect with that, because at the level of the soul, you are eternal servitor of God. So once you connect to that, the power that is unleashed through that understanding is tremendous. But now you're limiting yourself just to the bodily experience. All these dualities that simply bind you if you act at that level. Acting at that level is simply binding. But once you're aware you're the soul and connect in your constitution to the spiritual platform, then you are liberated. Then you are liberated. Then when you act, it's different from when you act at the way you're behaving now. So he goes on. As already explained, Buddhi Yoga means transcendental loving service to the Lord. So in today's verse, we heard Buddhi Yoga, where Krishna is saying it's your consciousness, Arjun. Buddhi, you are experiencing life because of the consciousness you've created for yourself. If you change that consciousness to a deeper level at the soul, you can have a much more profound experience of life. Therefore, your weakness of heart is your consciousness. Raise your consciousness. Raise your consciousness. And there are different ways to do that. Approach a spiritual master. Learn about different sadhana or spiritual techniques that can be applied to oneself to understand oneself at a deeper level. So he goes on here. Such devotional service is the right course of action for the living entity. So the process of connecting the soul to the spiritual platform is called Krishna consciousness. That is the process. And the practical application of that is devotional service, where the action is done in a mood of love. And in order for that to be the motivation, one has to understand who he is. What is his constitution? Who am I? If you think you're at the body, then you're going to have a different experience. But if you know you're the soul, then constitutionally you are the eternal servant of God. And that creates a different action. That creates a different system of action. A different result is also from that. So he goes on. Only misers desire to enjoy the fruits of their own work, just to be further entangled in material bondage. So again, Krishna is saying, because you're seeing yourself constitutionally as the body, therefore your consciousness is miserly. What you don't know is that a person who is self-centered or miserly feels that he inherits or deserves all the results of his work. And by doing that, he doesn't understand the mechanism, Arjun. He doesn't understand that every action is binding on the material platform. And even if you don't act and you're passive, that's also binding because you attach to not acting. And therefore, that also becomes attachment, Arjun. So in every way on the material level, one is getting bound. But the same activity done on a higher level of consciousness with a higher level of identity at the level of the soul is completely liberating. So just see the difference. So let's see what he says further. Except for work in Krishna consciousness, all activities are abominable because they continually bind the worker to the cycle of birth and death. So you see, you can't get away. This is the principle of nature, that if you act here, you're going to get a reaction. And if you don't act, you're also going to get a reaction. So how then does one exist in this world? One exists by the process of Krishna consciousness, which as its foundation is the process of devotional service, of love. When one acts in love and serves in love to please the Supreme Being, when one acts in that way, there is no reaction and the end result is liberating. So you're getting the same thing on a material level, but on the spiritual level, you're cultivating liberation. So where is the loss? Neha vikramana sosti pratyavayo na vidyate svalpamasya dharmasya trayate mahato bayat. In 2.40 we learned this, that there is no loss or diminution on this path. And a little advancement on this path can save one from the greatest type of fear. Whereas whatever you're doing as a miser on the material level of consciousness, you create a huge karmic bank account and you become a karmic millionaire, but you'll be bound. And this is what the miser is not seeing. He doesn't have the knowledge to see this. This only somebody who is beyond the material nature can tell you. And this is what Krishna is doing. From the spiritual platform, he's telling Arjuna at the material level, Arjun, if you don't raise your consciousness, whatever you decide and whatever you do, you're going to be bound. So he goes on here. One should therefore never desire to be the cause of work. So if you want to take all the results of your work, or as he says, if you want to be the cause of your work, if you want to be the cause, then you have to face the result. So by facing the result, whether you act or don't act, you're going to be bound. On so many different levels, your desire is being sanctioned. Because just on your own, we were giving the example of your hand and your leg, that today it works, tomorrow it doesn't work. You're paralyzed. So why is it that you can't move your hand? Because you're not the sole cause of the movement of your body. And if you're not the sole cause of the movement of your body and your act and your work or action, then how can you take all the results for yourself? That's a miser. You have to see on how many levels my action is being executed, on how many levels my action is being compensated. on how many levels my action is being fulfilled. That so many factors have to be in place just for me to experience this desire. Therefore, I have to acknowledge all of that and I have to reward all of that. I can't simply say that I am the cause and I want it because I don't see it. This is foolishness. Do you see the government? No, you only see the energy of the government by the police force, by the different utilities they provide, the roads and the safety mechanisms. You only see the energy, but do you see the government? No. So by a lower level of consciousness, we are seeing that I'm the only one here. I don't see anybody else. And whatever I have done, I've done out of my own hard work. No. Who gave you the air? Who gave you the water? Who gave you the intelligence? Who gave you the inspiration? Where all of that has come from? They say you need a whole community to bring up a child. So that whole community tolerated you when you were crying at night, tolerated you when you were playing and shouting and screaming. They built you up, they taught you their values. And now when you're big and strong, you don't consider anything of the society. You don't consider how to help or improve the society. This is miserliness. That we only who we are because of the society, because of the community, because of the higher cosmic management, because of so many factors. And therefore, when you see from a broader perspective, when you see from the level of the soul, when your consciousness is raised to that level, then you can understand the principle of charity. And then you can understand that I take my quota and I also contribute to the upliftment of the community or the society because they are also part of who I am. They have developed me to become this. And therefore, a major portion of my results is due to them. Therefore, the concept of charity and understanding the cosmic broader level of action and reaction. So he concludes here. Everything should be done in Krishna consciousness for the satisfaction of Krishna. Misers do not know how to utilize the assets of riches which they acquire by good fortune or by hard labor. So you see, when you work hard, you feel that I have deserved it because I've worked hard. But you're not the only one who did the work there. You're achieving your results because somebody has taught you 5 or 6 years of study at school. Somebody has taught you at primary level. Somebody has taught you at secondary level. You're achieving your results because somebody has developed you within a community. So you have a sense of belonging. Unless you look at all of that globally, how can you say this achievement is yours? You see how broad-minded one can think at the level of the soul? Therefore, one can understand I'm not the sole recipient of what I'm receiving. I'm receiving because of the goodwill of all these years. One should spend all energies working in Krishna consciousness, and that will make one's life successful. So Prabhupada gives a beautiful definition of success, that when one is successful on the spiritual level, that is true success. Otherwise, you've achieved on the material level, but what is the result? Temporary. Temporary result and binding. This is why we were not encouraging the Karmakanda results. Because Karmakanda means temporary and binding. Not only is it temporary and short-lived, but it binds one because it's action done on the material level. But the same activity done with the spiritual level of consciousness, not only you enjoy that result which is imbued with spiritual energy, but the true success is liberation. That one will be liberated from this material platform to the spiritual platform at the end of life. Like misers, unfortunate persons do not employ their human energy in the service of the Lord. So he's saying if you're just working hard for your own self or your family, it's good. It shows a good part of your character. But what you don't have the knowledge of is that your results will be temporary and your results will be binding. These two things are natural results of material activity. But if you do the same thing on a spiritual platform, that is true success. You can still enjoy the very same thing that you are hankering for. And the end result is that you will go back home, back to Godhead at the end of this lifetime. So you decide.